Mine is, yours are not. All right. This special meeting of the Mishawaka Common Council will please come to order. This evening, we have gathered for Mayor Wood's State of the City address, but before that, if we would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence in remembrance of the more than 542,000 Americans who have lost their lives as a result of COVID-19. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, this evening we have gathered for a special event, the Mayor's State of the City address, and it has long been the case that our regular council rules state that the mayor shall annually address the Common Council at its second regularly scheduled meeting in February. Although, as we all know, there was nothing regular at all about this past year. So unfortunately in 2020, due to the public health emergency, it wasn't possible for us to be able to have the Mayor's State of the City address in the public setting that we normally have. But the good news is that now, as circumstances have changed, it is appropriate for us to have this address presented in a public setting this evening. So tonight, we're proud as a council to be present. And even though we are slightly beyond the regularly scheduled time slot in February, and even though this will be much more of a virtual event in light of the ongoing pandemic, and as I understand it, there's an overflow room, as I've been told, at BATTELL Center. So we welcome everybody who is participating remotely, whether they're at BATTELL Center or otherwise. But the fact that we're able to gather here tonight is yet another sign that we as a community are slowly returning to a state of normalcy despite the pandemic. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable David A. Wood for the State of the City address. Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President and council members. David Wood, Mayor, here to deliver our 120th State of the City address. Tonight, we have our very own Princess City version of March Madness in store for you, complete with all the drama, excitement, some bracket busters, and a few upsets, though I'll try not to upset you too much. We have even our first ever watch party, as you mentioned, happening simultaneously over at the Battelle Community Center, where our department managers, Board of Commission volunteers, and our Mayor's Youth Council, coached by my wife Jamie and Executive Assistant Luann, have gathered to tune in. Refreshments have been provided, including Barnaby's Pizza and Chick-fil-A. I think you guys picked the wrong venue tonight. We gather here every year for this purpose, to look at our wins and our losses from the year in review and glimpse the future as we evaluate the state of our city and team. While I did not stand before you last year to deliver the address because we were preoccupied with far greater concerns, we still completed our duty to deliver a report to the council as required by ordinance. I thank you for your patience until we could safely meet again for this purpose. No good deed goes unpunished, so expect this year's presentation to be about twice as long as usual. While council meetings have been trending longer these days, expect my presentation to go long too, but I'll try to go shorter than the average council meeting. It shouldn't go longer than the average basketball game. We think nothing of sitting and watching our favorite team for a couple of hours in time. Tonight, I ask that you spend some quality time getting to know our beloved city at a little bit deeper level. I'd first like to acknowledge the great work of my State of the City All-Star Final Four team, comprised of Carl Kopek, Tim Brill, Brent Chupp, and Ken Prince, and all of our department managers. I'd like to personally thank them for helping us to compile, draft, edit, and publish this information. It's a massive undertaking. The overall state of our city hasn't changed for decades. We are typically a ranked team that flies under the radar, but almost always wins the games that we are expected to, and some of the ones that we aren't. We protect and defend our home court obsessively, and we typically see success as a result. Despite a major game-changing event last year, this year was no exception, and I don't get tired of repeating it. Even through a major pandemic and the most difficult year in memory, Mishawaka continues to be fundamentally strong, financially stable, safe, and growing. We strive to be the most livable city in northern Indiana, and we are seeing evidence of that all around, especially during, maybe even in part of, due to the pandemic. More and more people are realizing that Mishawaka not only always open as a great place to visit, shop, dine, recreate, work, start a business, but also as an attractive place to live, especially during times of uncertainty. Having gone through a year like no other, most cities have had to stop cold in their tracks, reevaluate their priorities and services as they begin to cautiously open back up. The impact on some will be devastating. The consequences are when the consequences are fully realized, and that may take years. While others are hitting the brakes, Mishawaka will be stepping on the gas. We expect to emerge from the pandemic with good fundamentals and a strong game plan, a new beginning. In this case, the COVID-19 pandemic represents a hurdle that we still need to finish clearing, but I believe that in 2021, our city will see a new beginning. Tonight, I'll share with you some of our future plans and opportunities, what this new beginning may look like for Mishawaka. I continue to believe that we should be very optimistic about our future. We have challenges to be sure, but we will meet those challenges head on to ensure that we thrive as a city. Needless to say, the past year has been a year like no other. The COVID-19 pandemic impacted the entire world in a monumental way, and Mishawaka was no different. In most years, we try to keep pace with the positive happenings in our community and perform the usually routine activities of city government. In 2020, we had to rethink everything and implement plans for delivering essential government services uninterrupted, but in a much different way during an unprecedented event. Last March, it became clear that the disease could not be reasonably controlled without drastic preventative measures. This was in part dictated by fear associated with the unknowns of a highly contagious and potentially deadly virus. At that time, schools shut down and started to go virtual. People started hoarding basic essentials, including food and toilet paper. Federal, state, and county directives came out and at times were unclear or even conflicting with one another. Decisions were made as to what was essential business or activity and what wasn't. As a result, many businesses were temporarily shut down. Others had to significantly alter how they do business. In our case, local government provides essential services that are very essential as any. Public safety is required no matter what the crisis. Utilities such as water, wastewater, and electric became even more valuable to those living in the city and staying at home. To provide these services, all other city departments still needed to function to support other departments and to be able to continue to respond to the public. When the city started to receive direction at the state and federal levels early in the pandemic, we actively engaged. City personnel participated in many meetings, including with the county health department, area hospitals, area healthcare providers, assisted living facilities, schools, and other community stakeholders. In addition to those meetings, we received briefings from the White House Center for Disease Control in the state of Indiana, our own Activate Medical Clinic, and our public safety departments. and I also maintain contact with mayors from surrounding cities. I appointed the Mishawaka Fire Department Assistant Chief of EMS Division, Brian Thomas, to serve as our city's czar on collecting and filtering through all of the vital information being provided to be able to provide the best guidance for the city. He and Chief Brian Woodward kept up on the data and reported on the ever-evolving conditions. We maintained a city COVID task force made up of key personnel with the city. In the beginning, we met daily to monitor events, discussing relevant issues, establishing protocols, and execute plans as conditions warranted. The task force helped work through issues such as building and equipment needs, cleaning and disinfection, employee-public interaction, even cancellations, human resources policies, and identifying emergency funding sources. And I'd like to thank them for that dedicated service. Lastly, in true Mishawaka form, where government's purpose is truly to serve its citizens rather than political ideology, the Mishawaka Common Council and the City Clerk immediately offered to assist in any way possible to help with the city's response. To continue the city's business uninterrupted, working with the city's IT department, council meetings were made with virtual options and were streamed live on Facebook as well as in person the entire time. With all of these efforts, not one department in the city ever closed throughout the pandemic. To make sure that we stayed in compliance with all safety protocols, various buildings were open only to staff. Some of our departments rotated shifts to ensure safety and could not be shut down by any single outbreak. The Mishawaka Fire Department established operating procedures where protective protocols were in place for every ambulance run, not just the ones that were COVID possibly existed. At City Hall, notices were posted that required appointments for services. This afforded time for each city department to prepare a COVID response plan and develop procedures and install precautionary measures to ensure, to the best of our ability, the essential services would continue safely without interruption. I'm often asked by newly elected mayors around the state for advice. The first thing I always tell them is that our position of public trust, it's important to know when to pull a lever of government and when not to, and it's more important to know when not to pull one. And it's hard to know the difference sometimes. That's exactly when we must rely on our faith, our values, and our experience. There was no duty manual for training that we could fall back on to guide us through a pandemic. We relied on our never-changing guiding values: faith, family, passion to serve, trust and reliance in each other, individual responsibility, and common sense. We assessed the situation based on the limited data we could gather specific to Mishawaka. We began to develop a good handle on what we were seeing in Mishawaka, and we did not overreact and resisted draconian measures just for the sake of doing something. We believed that every decision must be grounded in fact, that we could not exceed our statutory authority or take actions that were unenforceable, or we would quickly divide the public and, worse, lose their trust at a time when that trust was most crucial. We communicated necessary, useful information to our citizens as needed. We struck the balance right down the common sense middle, as Mishawaka is prone to do. I believe our strategy was effective, appropriate, and successful. Here in Mishawaka, our services continued uninterrupted. Our hospitals were stressed, but didn't waver. Our economy remained by and large open, and our citizens remained mostly safe. There are many that we owe a deep gratitude at this time for all of their service in getting us through this pandemic. Far too many to name. Mishawaka seemed to fare better than many other communities throughout the pandemic, largely because our citizens took it seriously, made good decisions for themselves and their families, and followed acceptable or applicable recommendations and orders. That being said, COVID-19 has taken a toll on the Princess City, to be sure. We have all likely lost a friend or a family member due to this plague. My heart has been broken by the loss of some great Mishawaka citizens that I have known most of my life, people I look up to, pillars of our community. My heart goes out to our citizens who have lost loved ones. We vow never to forget those we lost, nor the cause. We perhaps will never know the exact loss or be able to determine the exact economic impact of this pandemic, but of this I know for sure, we will recover and rebound better than ever. I usually like to call out staff members who have gone above and beyond the call of duty in my state of the city. This year, I'd like to call out and recognize the efforts of all of our staff throughout this past year. Whenever there is a need, challenge, or call for service, our staff always answers that call. Here in Mishawaka, we have been through a lot in dealing with an unprecedented pandemic, and we are meeting the great challenge of our time head on, together, and with courage. I have witnessed countless acts of bravery, compassion, dedication, creativity, and ingenuity by our staff. We are, after all, public servants in the true sense of the word, and that's what's expected of us in times of emergency. There were a lot of unknowns, uncertainty throughout the great pandemic. While hazardous duty is what is expected of us in public service when the time comes, there are times when we must go above and beyond our day-to-day duties and take on responsibilities that are not typically found in our job descriptions, or in some cases, can't even be known. I often say that it is local government level that provides the critical services that our citizens depend on the most. It's times such as these that our services matter the most. As such, our city facilities remained open. Our staff showed up to work when all other governments, whether they be local, state, or federal, were shutting down. I know that I asked a lot. That is only because I knew that our sense of duty and Mishawaka passion to serve would shine through. And I believe in our staff. We had to overcome the stress of responding to an enemy that was previously unknown, develop emergency modified operations, serve our public with professionalism, even as we may have been unsure or fearful ourselves, and we had to report for duty when family members were at home worrying themselves. I know that this has caused a lot of stress on our staff. Through it all, they did what they are here to do, deliver our vital service uninterrupted. In doing so, they have maintained the respect and confidence of those who put their trust in us. They have answered the call brilliantly. Now, the way we deliver our services might look a little different, but we have and will continue to deliver them uninterrupted. I know a few other organizations that can say that. I am exceptionally proud of all of our staff and honored to work here alongside them. And you. I want to personally thank each and every one of my colleagues for their service, support, and friendship throughout this most trying of years. Just a few months into the crisis, we knew the impacts would be significant, but we had optimism and that we would endure, and that the good old American ingenuity and fortitude would prevail. To address the impacts of the crisis, I directed a multifaceted approach aimed at our city's recovery and named Ken Prince to be the recovery czar to lead these efforts. We developed a three-tiered approach aimed at 1, meeting the critical needs of our citizens, 2, meeting the economic needs of our small businesses, and 3, long-term economic stimulus. The first step was a targeted allocation of federal funds to benefit our citizens in need. Government is not always good at many things, including providing social services. For that, we rely on experts and nonprofits around our community. We identified and formed partnerships with several organizations in our community and allocated funding to provide a social safety net for our citizens. Recipients included Real Services for food and utility assistance, the Boys and Girls Club for crucial services for children, the YWCA for food supplies, protective equipment for women and families, School City of Mishawaka for funding a portion of their food program and for providing protective supplies, and the Mishawaka Food Pantry for food, supplies, and assistance. The city also developed a very unique small business loan program aimed at preventing closures of small business. The specifics of the loan program were worked out on the fly. The city also partnered with local bank to administer the loan program. In general, the city's intent was to limit these loans to small businesses who were significantly impacted. The following are the key characteristics that define the program. Small businesses were defined as revenue under $2 million. A maximum amount of the loan was $10,000. The loan did not require any repayment for the first 6 months and then would be paid back at 0% interest over a 2-year period. Ultimately, several businesses took advantage of the program, and it might have made the difference between them staying in business or closing for good. The city's largest recovery initiative is our local construction stimulus. One of the impacts of the pandemic for the city of Mishawaka has been a drop in construction activity that we'll talk about in a little bit. And many of the private sector construction projects that had been planned prior to begin 2020 and 21 have been delayed or even canceled. Within our region, the University of Notre Dame has long been a stabilizing influence in economic downturns and has been able to proceed with large construction projects when others couldn't. Within the last 5 years, it's estimated that Notre Dame alone has invested $1 billion in construction activity. But the pandemic has hit colleges and universities, public school corporations particularly hard financially. As a result, we know a few large construction projects that are moving forward now. We have also heard that other government entities have pulled back on spending and are holding projects given the uncertainties associated with the pandemic. As we have discussed in the summer of 2020, when the Small Business Loan Program was created, we felt that the pandemic could have a negative long-term impact on construction trades because of the compounding effect of lack of spending on capital projects. We saw this during the Great Recession, where based on market conditions, we lost many home builders. As a result, many tradespeople were forced to change professions, retire, or move away from our region altogether. As part of the recovery of Mishawaka, we are proposing a stimulus bond through the city's Consolidated Tax Incremental Finance District. We feel that keeping the construction trades active will not only help them, but it will actively help have a significant compounding effect on the overall economy. The suppliers, the local restaurants, service businesses, not to mention the employees of the contractors, will all see immediate tangible benefits of this activity. Now, as a former banker, I'm not inclined to take on debt. Indeed, we have paid off much of our debt and have no debt in our general fund. One of the reasons, among many, that we paid off this debt was to create capacity in the event of an emergency. I believe the pandemic classifies as an emergency. Beyond that, if there was ever a time to borrow, now may be it. I am proposing a $45 million bond to tick off several major projects on our capital projects list. Now is the perfect storm to get this done. Bond rates are historic lows. We expect to be at less than 1% interest. We would also have a much shorter term than typical bonds, somewhere between 10 and 15 years. Recent bidding activity also has been very competitive. We are seeing significant savings in project bids right now. We think that it's enough to cover any accrued interest on the bond. And lastly, projects included in the bond projects list are all going to be built by the city over time anyway. We will get a lot of projects done soon to take advantage of these market trends rather than wait until we have the cash built up to push the projects forward. And accomplish them in some cases 10 years earlier, saving substantial money than what we would pay in 10 years from now. There will be no tax increase as a result of this initiative, and we will remain debt-free in our general fund. We've had our consultants working diligently preparing construction plans since last summer in preparation of this program. I look forward to sharing with the council over the next coming months some of the work that we have planned here tonight, and we will discuss later in our presentation. As I was writing this presentation, the federal government was in the process of firing up the old printing press and passing a third round of construction or of COVID stimulus. The important difference between this and previous rounds was that local governments received, in some cases, very large sums of money. Mishawaka is set to receive nearly $12 million. It is my goal that we will use this money for its intended purpose: revenue replacement and stimulus. We were originally told that the funds would come with few strings attached. We should have known better. Since the feds are involved, we never quite believed that that would be the case. We are now finding out that there are significant strings attached. We continue to review the cans and the can'ts for spending the funds, and once we have a good understanding of the restrictions, we'll then develop a plan in working with the council. It's hard to believe that during a global pandemic that we could have a lot of other things to report on. And thanks to our dedicated employees, we do. So let's get started with that, shall we? Let's start where all things start for us, the budget. How a city manages its finances are traditionally the most significant differences between cities that thrive and those that are struggling. To thrive as a city requires that we have adequate funding and that tax money is managed wisely. In 2020, the council passed another honestly balanced budget for 2021 that provides for the priorities, including investment in public safety, streets, and parks, while including a well-deserved raise for our staff. Mishawaka is committed to being fiscally conservative and not incurring long-term legacy costs that could jeopardize our stability in times of uncertainty, just like we are experiencing with COVID-19. Indeed, our success is based on it, and last year proved that our strategy works. Our strong financial management is in large part due to the ongoing efforts of our controller, Becky Miller, and her all-star team. In 2020, despite the pandemic, we continued to build cash to weather the fiscal cliff that was fully felt in 2020. Finding revenue and/or cutting millions from our budget continues to be a challenge. Shifting expenses to non-priority tax funds and conservative budgeting are just a couple of strategies that we continue to employ to mitigate the losses. As expected in 2020, our circuit breaker losses were at their highest at $7.7 million. That is an increase of $1.9 million over the previous year. The pandemic also brought a new set of obstacles in local government revenue that involves income tax. Our capital projects and public safety rely on income tax. When people are out of work or stop driving or buying gas, as happened in last March, April, the city sees a corresponding reduction in this revenue. Our financial consultants estimate that these reductions from the pandemic are expected to fully impact the city in about the 2022-2023 timeframe. While the pandemic created many challenges for local governments, there was also a silver lining. Hiring and certain spending was slowed. The city also received $1.6 million from the state for relief. These unexpected budget items helped increase our general fund balance. This increase will be used to offset our expected income tax loss in the next few years. And in 2020, with this fiscal cliff loss of 7.7, due to property tax caps in 2020, we were able to increase general fund balance by $2.3 million. Public safety is my top priority. The men and women of the Mishawaka Police Department do an outstanding job of keeping our citizens safe. I see the calls every day that take my breath away. I see the split-second decisions that our public safety officers have to make, and they make the right ones. But what is typically not known, but what I know, is the thousands of times our officers impact people's lives in a positive way throughout their acts of kindness that go far above and beyond their call of duty. These brave public servants save lives. 2020 was a trying year. In addition to the pandemic, our country faced civil unrest not seen in generations. Here in Mishawaka, we support everyone's right to peacefully protest, march, and exercise their First Amendment freedoms. At the same time, we witnessed in other cities, we started out as peaceful. What started out as peaceful can easily turn into violence with a different agenda. I'm very proud of our Mishawaka Police Department leadership team for actively monitoring activities and guiding our police forces' involvement to allow these protests to occur with only minor incidents of vandalism. In the summer, when protesters illegally occupied the Main Street Bridge looking to cause disruption, our police quickly placed cones and directed traffic away from the protests and even issued citations for blocking the bridge. This quick action prevented inherent conflict from happening and was clearly desired. I am sometimes approached by our citizens who ask why Mishawaka is not in the news very often. One of the big reasons is how great of a job our police department does at preventing conflicts and keeping the peace. There's no service provided by local government more vital than public safety. As mayor, one of the accomplishments that I'm most proud about is the fact that overall crime reporting numbers have decreased 9 of my 11 years as mayor. Since taking office since 2010, every year except 2016 and 2018 had a decrease in the overall crime rate. That being said, a lot of the changes in our statistics in 2020 were driven by the pandemic, both positive and negative. Mishawaka's crime rate relative to our population is driven in part by a constant influx of daily visitors to the large retail shopping area in our region. When the pandemic hit, one of the impacts was a significant decrease in crimes like shoplifting, simply because many stores were no longer open. Then, as the pandemic went on, there was also a change in people's behavior as they became restricted. Overall, in 2020, the crime rate of the city of Mishawaka fell by a whopping 20%. The largest decrease of that occurred in robberies and assaults. Unfortunately, nearly 2 years without a homicide, the city experienced 6 in 2020. Based on the investigations of those in the homicides, none were random acts, and most involved people that do not reside in the city of Mishawaka. We are not alone. Besides the FBI statistics, homicides were up across, or based on FBI stats, homicides were up across the country by 21% in 2020, the largest single-year increase since 1968. I want to acknowledge the incredible amount of community support given and received by our Mishawaka Police Department, especially last year. Our officers work hard to engage with the community, whether it's shoveling for an elderly woman or rescuing ducklings from a storm drain. These are the acts performed every day by our heroes that don't make local headlines, but continue to be why our community has the trust and respect of our department. Over at the fire department, there's no question that this was a year that was unheard of and put a strain on the Mishawaka Fire Department, unlike any other year in our lifetimes. The pandemic forced significant changes to the department's daily operations and routines that put them more in line with the essential operations. New policies were created regarding social distancing, face coverings, and personal protective equipment on calls. Restrictions were put in place at our stations, and we canceled all public interaction, including the public education classes. Restrictions were placed on travel and training for our firefighters as well. The department battled through multiple quarantines and positive cases, but much to the credit of the men and women at the fire department, emergency operations were never impacted. And in 2020, the Mishawaka Fire Department responded to 8,269 calls for service, which is slightly down from the year before. This is due primarily to the impact of the pandemic, with less people traveling and such. And the greatest number of calls for service came for our EMS services, 6,259 of those calls, and 199 calls involved actual fires. In 2020, the Mishawaka tallied about $61 million in total construction, about 28% below our 10-year average. This drop is partly attributed to the impacts of the COVID-19 virus. Residential new construction actually remained steady and residential remodels increased slightly. This is consistent with the general population being home and undertaking projects based on time or need associated with working from home. At the same time, commercial and hospitality businesses struggled and worked just to stay open and provide services while protecting employees and customers. Despite decreases, our long-term forecast remains very promising. We have seen many businesses make changes on the fly and deal with more drive-through, curbside pickup, delivery services as part of normal operations. In 2020 and beyond, there will be a demand for reinvestment and growth as various entities will look again to make strategic investments. Knowing that there is both hardship and pent-up demand in our market, we think it's reasonable to expect an average year of construction in 2021. The city's planned stimulus bond should ensure at least minimum levels of construction. One thing for sure, the pandemic will cause shifts in our market. Some short-term, some permanent, some minor, some major. It may take a few years to determine just what those are. We have already seen some businesses close or left with less financial capacity. Others have grown or have seen record profits. Industry analysts estimate that many customer behaviors have likely also permanently changed, as well as the impact on markets in the city. All right, will have an impact on our markets in our city. On a positive note, we are seeing the benefits of our hard work regarding the redevelopment of our historic downtown despite the pandemic. Mishawaka continues to reinvest in the cultural heart of our city, including promoting our greatest natural resource, the St. Joe River. It has been more than 5 years since the state of Indiana promised to an initiative to help thwart the ongoing brain drain occurring in the state of Indiana. Specifically, the trend has been that a disproportionate number of Indiana's college graduates end up leaving the state to find work or pursue career in cities such as Chicago and other larger metropolitan areas. These young professionals have been leaving not only just to find work, matching their education, they were leaving seeking a specific quality of life. An outcome of this initiative was that Indianapolis-based Flaherty and Collins received close to $5 million of State of Indiana Regional Cities funds to construct the mill at Ironworks Plaza. The mixed-use development with lower-level commercial and higher-end residential apartments features high-quality amenities and common areas intended to attract a broad range of tenants, including the desired young professionals. The project was a game changer. The building started leasing in late 2019. Last year, the building continued to lease up well, even during the pandemic. At the end of 2020, residential units in the building were 90% occupied. Flaherty and Collins, who owns many projects like this all over the country, including the project, indicated that this project here in Mishawaka was one of their best performers during the pandemic. We heard multiple stories of those who were forced to work from home during the pandemic, chose to leave metropolitan areas like Chicago for Mishawaka. because of the availability of this kind of urban housing. We have been told by the developer that they are close to signing restaurants at the end caps very soon, perhaps even today. In 2020, the Murphy Law Rice office added diversity to our downtown redevelopment efforts, and more downtown development on the way, some already announced and some we can't yet announce. Last year, the city also extended development agreements with the Front Street Opportunity Fund mixed-use project on Front Street, the Barak Group Hotel over on the island, and the Riverwalk condominiums on the north side of the river at the end of Sarah Street. Downtown Mishawaka's image and desirability changed dramatically for the better when Flaherty and Collins completed the mill at Ironworks Plaza mixed-use development. I am pleased now to be able to report another new beginning. Although we are at the very preliminary stages, Flaherty and Collins has just submitted an application to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation for over $8 million in industry recovery tax credit funds. If they are successful, Flaherty and Collins will pursue building an additional 215 unit mixed-use luxury apartment complex at the former Unaroyal site downtown. Specifically, the proposed site is open the field next to Hill Street between the Riverwalk and Front Street, immediately west of the existing mill. Because of the significant expense associated with building parking garages and providing higher density development, even with these potential funds from the state, the project will still require some assistance from the city to become a reality. The estimated project total cost is about $48 million. So why is this project so important? As you know, the ability to attract and maintain quality talent within our state is invaluable in advancing the economic climate of our community. Quality of life is one of the main factors young people, professionals consider when choosing where to start their careers. The proposed mixed-use building will certainly serve as an attraction for those considering to make Mishawaka their home. This isn't just hearsay. Flaherty and Collins shared some very important demographics of their tenants that have moved into phase one of the mill. 85% of those tenants came from other areas than Mishawaka. 33% came from out of state. The average tenant age is 33 years old, and the average household income is in excess of $120,000 per year. Essentially, people who can choose to live anywhere are choosing to live right downtown Mishawaka. The pandemic posed different challenges to our Parks Department in 2020. One of the main functions of our department is to provide events and activities that bring people together, exactly opposite of the direction we received when COVID broke out. I'm very appreciative of the Parks Department and Superintendent Phil Blasco and their creative staff. Despite the limitations imposed by the governor and local health department, the Mishawaka Parks Department took on the challenges and continually found ways to engage our community through programming, events, and enrichment. We also are very thankful for the trust our residents put in us this year in keeping their safety in mind when offering opportunities to enjoy everything that the Parks Department had to offer. In Mishawaka, we are constantly reinvesting in our parks. Our parks and department have a direct impact on our quality of life for our citizens and will continue to be a priority of my administration. In 2020, the city celebrated ribbon cuttings at the following locations: Twin Branch Park, the culmination of over 4 phases of planning and investment. The vision finally became a reality and fully implemented. We opened up the new phase, complete with basketball court, 2 new pavilions, a new precast concrete restroom, as well as pickleball courts. Over at Veterans Parkway, the city completed and dedicated, the Veterans Plaza at Battelle Park. The project included relocating and restoring the Civil War monument and creating a gathering place with flag array honoring each branch of our military. Our plan was originally to dedicate this during the Memorial Day Parade, which ultimately got canceled. However, we still could depend on our veterans to step up, and we had a small ceremony to get that task accomplished, which is sacred to us. We were still able to then use it throughout the year for small ceremonies, and are grateful for the opportunity to have an event like the space like this, honoring those whose sacrifice means so much to us. Our biggest park project was the Ball Band Beer Garden, a venue named for the factory that once stood on the site, has become the popular, trendy new hangout space for the Princess City. Our opening event honored and celebrated the life of former Mayor Bob Buter, who passed away in January of 2020. May, Bob's wife, told us that their first public event was a root beer social, and so we felt it altogether fitting to open the event with a root beer social, which we did with a limited amount of people. This one-of-a-kind Ball Band Beer Garden also allowed our park department to engage in new ways. It also gives a unique venue to form new partnerships with local businesses, and we can generate new revenue for our Mishawaka parks. Thanks to community partnerships, we are able to provide COVID-compliant activities for people to enjoy, such as happier hours, Friday and Saturday evenings, and also 1K Cafe Monday mornings, concerts on Wednesday evenings, and food truck Fridays. The project included also a very, I think, tasteful addition to our art in public places, which is Moore's Magnus Pisceum, our steelhead fish sculptures at the plaza. In the summer of 2020, the Mishawaka Farmers Market moved to its new home and on our Festival Street at Ironworks Plaza. The change in location led to increased attendance by vendors and by the community. It ran for 15 weeks, and we had 20 vendors throughout the season to start the season, and we ended up with 40 at the end. We know right now that we have 17 committed growers, farmers committed to coming back this year, and we anticipate at least 50 vendors to start the farmers market this year. We also have planned many other unique events, such as Food Truck Wednesdays, trivia nights, comedy nights, tailgaters, socials, family game nights, family painting nights, concerts, car shows, dances, and maybe even a cornhole tournament at the beer garden this year. One of the best collaborations throughout the pandemic was the partnership between School City of Mishawaka and the Parks Department. We are pleased to announce in 2020 that an award of $191,500 by the United States Department of Education was targeted to improve internet connectivity in our deserts, internet connectivity deserts in Mishawaka, and that negatively impacts our children who were learning remotely. The grant will be used to provide Wi-Fi at our public parks and also Comcast Internet Essentials for families who qualify. As I mentioned, one of our fundamental priorities is to constantly reinvest in our park system. Neighborhood parks can be particularly challenging to fund since they are typically located in geographic areas that don't allow us to use TIF funding. The benefits of stabilizing and encouraging investment in neighborhoods makes it essential that we continue to prioritize funds for these improvements. We currently budgeted $250,000 a year for neighborhood park improvements out of seeded. Sometimes it takes multiple years to finish a park, but it makes a big impact. Mary Gibbard and the completion of Twin Branch Park prove that and are the perfect examples of the kind of investment that really can impact the neighborhood. Our next neighborhood park will receive some long overdue improvements. It is Temple Park. Several members of the neighborhood have reached out to me to consider improvements to Temple. Help is on the way. The dilapidated restroom, we think the worst in the city of Mishawaka, will be replaced this year with a precast concrete structure identical to what is at Twin Branch. And we have also currently are working to resolve a property ownership issue there. Once we have resolved that, we will be meeting with the neighborhood and working with them to reinvent their park. When we are done, it will be a true neighborhood gem. Leadership in most Indiana communities is old, yet decisions made today will impact our youth the most. It's equally important to have young people who are looking forward, wondering what could be, as it is to have older people who look back and remember what was. Any new beginning for our city starts with involving and preparing our future generations for leadership. One of my most important initiatives continues to be to educate our youth about our city and to show them the value of their hometown. I want them to see what is available for their future in our city and hope that they will return after college or whatever their pursuit may be to continue to make Mishawaka their home. The Mayor's Youth Advisory Council is just one way my wife Jamie and I can give back to our city by empowering the youth of Mishawaka to have a voice to address issues of concerns that affect them directly, not only today, but tomorrow as well. Even through the pandemic, my Mayor's Youth Council continued to meet in person and continued another successful year of community service, local government studies, and educational opportunities with area businesses and volunteer work around the city. This year's group consisted of 29 members, and they are still tuning in and they are actually tuning in, hopefully still, at our watch party here tonight. I know this because I told them that I'd be giving them a quiz afterwards. Every youth council class contributes a lasting legacy, a project to the Princess City. This year's project is not only going to transform the city, but it's the first of its kind in the state of Indiana, or maybe even the country as we know it. It began with my youth council applying for a grant through the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, known as the My Vision, My Community program, which is youth planning partnership between ICTA and IUPUI, School of Public and Environmental Affairs. The program is in its 6th year, was developed on behalf of the young people in Indiana, a belief that young people in Indiana shouldn't have to leave their hometowns in order to achieve their dreams. Well, my group thought big and came up with some great ideas. The one that stuck was the giant outdoor board game park. They began researching games and thinking about locations to put the giant game boards, and soon realized that this project was going to cost more than their initial grant. And preferred location of the Ironworks Plaza downtown couldn't really work out based on timing. The two things they had to do was to raise additional funds for the project and work on a new location. Their project was selected and they received $500,000 for implementation. Then in January 2020, the group applied for an Excellence in Youth Leadership Award with the AIM Youth Council Network, and in February attended the workshop with me in Franklin College, where they were awarded $5,000, which became $10,000 for their work. And by the way, they competed with many other youth councils around the state to win that prize. As one of my, on the way back actually from that trip, we started to think big and thought, you know what, these kids have done a great job for their community and have worked hard for it. Let's give them a park to design. Since we had one in the queue to redesign that was actually being used as our team park, it seemed totally appropriate to give them Hums Park as a blank canvas to redesign. The main objective of the Youth Council is education, and so we gave them a blank park of $500,000, which was, through their help, was $510,000, and a expectation that they design and work through our processes to build this park. We divided the Youth Council up into committees: site committee, amenities, budget committee, marketing, and even a crowdfunding. And the groups worked hard, sought guidance from various department managers over the next few months, deciding on what equipment they wanted or needed in the park and how it would all fit together. And so, needless to say, they did a complete redesign of that park. The Youth Council wanted teen-oriented activities to meet that need. Cement cornhole boards, ping pong tables, checker and chess tables, and a gaga pit, I still don't know what that is, were added. A new pavilion was added, and handicap accessible bike trail and walking path around the entire park were added as well. Engineering found some extra money to pave the parking lot. Existing amenities were improved, including the resurfacing of the basketball court. And we also will be adding a Ninja Warrior course, a first of its kind in our area. And it was installed by our very talented Central Services Department. The Mishawaka High School Garden Club will be putting in an orchard. And lastly, the Youth Council was just completed a fundraising campaign for a hammock station. And they raised $7,500, which was matched by patronicity through the state of Indiana, and meaning they'll have $15,000 to go into this unique, trendy amenity. And as I said, these kids are in charge of every aspect of the park, including renaming it. And last Thursday, my youth council met to discuss renaming the park. After reviewing several nominations, they have chosen a name, and the kids voted on it. And the Youth Council Naming Committee is working now with the Mishawaka Parks Board to gain their approval and favor. Work on the park is nearly complete, and we should have a ribbon cutting sometime in May. On the subject of youth doing great things and basketball, one of Mishawaka's very own, Devin Kennedy, who played at Marion and recently in the NCAA tournament, March Madness tournament a couple of years ago for Princeton, and now a member of the NBA Orlando Magic, texted me a few days ago to let me know that he was just named the NBA G League MVP. I've watched Devin grow up here, and as an old basketball coach myself, watched him develop as a fine player on the courts of Mishawaka. He has always kept in touch with me and always wants to stay up to date with what's happening in his hometown. Devin has a bright future ahead of him, and no matter where basketball takes him, he will always be proud to call Mishawaka home. As a city, we have roads, sewer, water, storm water, a lot of infrastructure, some of which is over 100-year-old. And this means that we must constantly maintain, improve, and add to that infrastructure. Our engineering department does a masterful job of organizing our consultants and our contractors to make sure that we spend money wisely on capital improvements and that they are built for the long term in mind. Projects under construction in 2020 totaled about $9.9 million, and these are some of the things we've been working on. Work over at the East Raceway right downtown in the heart on the island. Mishawaka takes pride in its ability to partner with developers to realize their dreams and benefit the greater community. This year, the focus was on the continued revitalization of the Central Business District, specifically the island east of Main Street between the river and the race formerly used by the Unaroyal Power Plant and the coal yard there. This is the future site of the hotel and conference facility. In order to prepare the previously industrial land for redevelopment, the city committed to utility improvements, raceway reconstruction, and a modified street configuration. Future phases of this site will include parking, unique water feature, and river walk improvements. This is the time of year when the mortal enemy of all mayors, the diabolical pothole, shows up like an unwanted carbuncle to wreak havoc on our roads, the tires and suspensions of our motoring public, not to mention the careers of a few mayors. Mishawaka stands apart here too. While we have potholes, to be sure, I've heard numerous testimonials that Mishawaka roads are in better condition than most of our neighbors, and they are about to get even better. That's because Mishawaka is about to put a combined total of $6.58 million into repaving in 2021. That's over 4 times the funds invested in 2020. The city has 178.28 miles of streets. Each one is graded by our engineering department on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, and it's a nationally recognized scale. By the end of the paving season, we will have repaved 12.9 miles of city streets with the worst pavement ratings, and we will no longer have any 2s or under, which is, we are the only ones that I know of will be able to say that in this area. One of the big reasons why our roads in the region are better than most in the region is because of the Community Crossings grant program offered through the state of Indiana. The city was awarded $427,000 in matching grants for the 2020 construction season. With that, we were able to do Grape Road, and we also were able to do University Drive between Main Street and University Park Mall. And it also allowed us to accomplish part of our ongoing effort to retrofit sidewalks into our northern shopping district roads. And that's an effort that will continue. In 2020, the city was awarded $383,000 in Community Crossings matching grants for this coming season. And so this year we will work on resurfacing Main Street, Day Road, Edison Road, and Catawba Drive. The Department of Redevelopment received 2020 federal funds for curb and sidewalk work, specifically to increase ADA compliance within low and moderate income census tracts. With these funds, we were able to do about a mile's worth of curb and sidewalk, including some new handicap ramps on 3rd Street. In addition to these CDBG funded projects, we were able also to do new water lines, storm sewers, and sanitary sewers and laterals as well. Mishawaka's greatest resource is the St. Joe River. Indeed, it's why Mishawaka was founded. It exists today, and we cherish it. It is the source of much of our economic development, recreation, beauty, and opportunity. And now is the time of the year when thousands of fishermen converge on Fishawaka from all around the region and even the country to fish for the elusive steelhead salmon. I know a secret spot if they're looking. Just today, you will see fishermen lining the banks and boats trolling just offshore. We have invested tens of millions of dollars to improve access to the river and our riverfront parks, connected by the Riverwalk, which gets hundreds of thousands of unique visits each year. And at any given point in time, you will see scores of citizens of all ages strolling, jogging, biking, picnicking, fishing, kayaking, golfing, boating, and skipping stones in an idyllic setting. It's Americana. It wasn't always like that. When I was a child, I was always told not to go near the river. It was too dangerous, too dirty. It was dirty and it was smelly too. Factories polluted the river and it was an unattractive place to be, especially downtown. But I grew up on it and have never been more than a couple of miles from it. I couldn't resist its lure. It brought me adventure, recreation, peace, food, some tough lessons, and even a few scars, but most importantly, great memories of the countless hours I spent near and on it. In fact, I just recently completed my 5th St. Joe River cruise, a kayak trip from Mishawaka to Lake Michigan, a 2-day, 60-mile trek with my friends and family. This last year, I took my 15-year-old son with me, and it's become a rite of passage for my boys. Now the river is altogether different. Since 1990, Mishawaka has made historic investments to reduce combined sewer overflows and their impact on water quality in the St. Joe River. The river cuts through the heart of our downtown and has become a focal point for development, both public and private, in our revitalized central city. Protection of this vital asset is a priority for Mishawaka. Our efforts have included 2 upgrades at our wastewater treatment plant, separation of combined sewers in selected areas, upsizing sewers to eliminate bottlenecks, and extensive pipelining to eliminate infiltration, and very aggressive sewer maintenance, which I can't speak highly enough about down at our sewer department. The results: the river is as clean now as it has been in my lifetime and in any of our lifetimes. Like about 105 other Indiana communities, Mishawaka was developed with a combined sewer system. During large storms, our system, which carries both sewage and stormwater, can become overloaded, resulting in discharge of raw sewage into the St. Joe River. The Clean Water Act requires cities with combined sewer systems to develop long-term control plans to reduce or eliminate discharges of combined sewage. Mishawaka our long-term control plan was entered into with a federal consent decree in 2014, and Mishawaka has already spent $252 million to achieve a CSO capture, and our results are impressive. In fact, we have eliminated 99.54% of annual CSO discharge by volume, from 314 million gallons to less than 4.1 million gallons in a typical year. Despite these tremendous improvements, Mishawaka continues to invest millions in further infrastructure projects to reduce CSO volume. The remaining CSOs represent just 0.4% of all the bacterial load in our river, decreased from 5.6% in 2007. As a result, even if we were to totally eliminate our CSOs, spending an additional $160,000, it would have result in not a single hour of compliance with the current state standards. This is because we have already made the right investments. And while we all want the St. Joe River to be better than it is today, additional spending on CSO infrastructure can't get us there, quite simply. Furthermore, Mishawaka is also facing over $150 million of necessary upgrades to our water and our electric utilities. With these additional infrastructure needs, non-beneficial spending on CSOs is the wrong investment for our community. To give some human context to this, if the needed improvements to water and electric moved forward with our current consent decree CSO long-term control plan, 2 out of every 5 households, or 40% of our households, would be paying over 10% of their income for these 3 utilities. And further, $150 a month just on wastewater alone. So people sometimes ask me if I have regrets. My typical answer is no. Regret is unprofessional. But if pressed, I'd say that I have but one: signing a consent decree with the United States Department of Justice, the United States EPA, and with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management that binds us to a long-term control plan that addresses our combined sewer overflow system. I have mentioned in past occasions the single greatest issue facing the city is the renegotiation of our long-term control plan. The current plan that we are legally bound to, criminally so, if we were to fail to do it, requires Mishawaka to achieve 0 overflows when our neighboring cities on the same stretch of river are allowed many more overflows and much higher volumes of sewage discharge. In fact, Mishawaka is already discharging about 10 times less now than our neighbors will be discharging after their approved long-term control plans are complete. That's how subjective this is. Further, we are currently required to build a boondoggle deep tunnel, 1.5 miles long, 70 feet deep, and 12 feet diameter tube that will accomplish nothing but bankrupt our city's utility, mortgage our ratepayers' future, and strap future generations with massive maintenance costs. And it will not clean the river one bit. Studies have shown that increasing the percentage capture would result in no measurable improvement in river water quality standards. Therefore, the cost of capture of this last 0.4% of overflow, which is currently estimated at over $160 million, cannot be justified. What the United States EPA and IDEM are asking Mishawaka to do is completely subjective, it's punitive, it's unjust, it's unsustainable, and it's absolutely immoral. And I will not build a tunnel. Common sense will prevail. Either the EPA and IDEM help us to get to common sense solutions, or Mishawaka will do it on its own. Ultimately, our plan has to work for the sake of our long-term viability of our utility, our ratepayers, and the environment. Mishawaka continues to be engaged in ongoing good faith discussions with the EPA and the state of Indiana to modify our consent decree and negotiate an affordable, justifiable, common sense endpoint that will protect the environment while not oppressively burdening the citizens of Mishawaka. We have developed great negotiation strategy with our team of experts. We are reasonably optimistic that some good old-fashioned Princess City common sense will prevail. Negotiations have continued into 21 here, and we are hopeful that we could reach a conclusion before year's end. While we remain committed to negotiation, the game clock is ticking. If discussions stall, we will exhaust any and all means to achieve our goal, including litigation in the legal system. In parallel to our renegotiation, the city of Mishawaka and the city of Angola, along with many other communities, are leading an effort to change Indiana's outdated recreational water quality standards that are based on old, obsolete data and are stricter than the United States Environmental Protection Agency standards. We are seeking an administrative change through IDEM's Rules Committee, and if that fails, we will seek a legislative remedy. Lastly, I have directed that the city move forward with what we are affectionately calling the Wood Long-Term Control Plan. In it, we will complete elements of the existing long-term control plan that do not require a deep tunnel, and we will focus on the works, specifically what works for Mishawaka. Investments that improve our existing infrastructure, such as sewer, water, electric, curb, sidewalk, and roads, and revitalizes our neighborhoods in the process. My plan, called the Mishawaka Sewer Separation and Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, concentrates more on reconstruction and separation rather than storage, and it is meant to improve our aging infrastructure and rehabilitate neighborhoods. This effort was conceived in 2019 and continued in 2020, becoming more refined. The emphasis mimics some of what's already worked and been implemented right here in the Princess City. The city in previous years removed entire streets in certain areas and installed separation of sewer, sanitary, and storm, as well as, while we're in there, lead water service that is can be harmful. And we took electric service underground. Above ground, new streets, curbs, sidewalks, street lighting, and other amenities were constructed in a neighborhood that needs that kind of redevelopment the most. The best news about this approach is that we can do it sustainably. With a set budget that is already built into our rates, meaning no immediate need for rate increases to fund our some of the extravagant projects that would be required from our long-term control plan. Neighbors will feel the pain of construction, but we always hold their hands through it with the promise that we will leave their neighborhood far better than we found it. With an ongoing annual commitment, we would eventually get there with a much more sustainable system. My ambitious goal is to preserve the integrity of our nonprofit utility, to save our city hundreds of millions of dollars, and our ratepayers hundreds and thousands of dollars a year, while still improving our wastewater collection system and protect our environment in meaningful ways. We are already implementing our plan. In 2020, you can expect construction in the Charlotte Fairmount neighborhood, the Helen DeLorenzi neighborhood, and the Linden neighborhood, which will actually continue. Another neighborhood improvement project will begin this year. We will return to the traditional West End and continue storm sewer and infrastructure improvements of West Street Master Plan, which was started several years ago. This phase includes West Street from 6th to 7th and Wells Street from 5th to 7th, as well as some intersections in the area. We will also take advantage of the opportunity to address a little jewel that we have in our city, and that's the West End Business District, in which case we will also be doing some decorative stamped concrete with adjacent ADA compliant walks, decorative lighting, underground utilities, as well as enhancing the corridor with some aesthetics and safety enhancements, such as trees and decorative lighting. My board of directors at the BK Club have approved this work, and construction should begin here yet this spring. And this will be the first of a phase that will ultimately get us to Rose Park, and after that we will look to redesign Rose Park. We're at halftime. Let's just keep on going, shall we? I often say that one of the fundamentals of a thriving community is represented by what our citizens can totally take for granted. The city's utilities are not only basic necessities of life that our citizens can completely take for granted, but they are also key to our strategic growth. While I believe that our utilities have the potential to give us a competitive advantage to attract new business well into the future, we are also trying to keep pace with the federal and state regulations, the unfunded mandates that will force us to walk a fine line between our obligation to comply and mandates to keep rates competitive. The city does not produce power. We buy it wholesale and distribute it on our own grid. To provide power to our customers, we purchase power from large producers. Following a competitive bid process, we entered into a long-term 10-year agreement with Wolverine Power Cooperative. This nearly 5-year process culminated in the seamless switch to Wolverine Power from American Electric Power last June. This new 10-year agreement will allow the city to maintain the lowest residential electric rates in the region. And one significant benefit of this is that it allowed us to even do an electric rate decrease, as well as give us the opportunity to upgrade our system from the antiquated 4 kV up to 12 kV, which will also help our system be more efficient and provide our power reliably, even though we are seeing ever increasing electrical demands. Over at the Water Division, we have been busy preparing for generational improvements that will secure our long-term water needs. Last year, our city completed the work on the new 2 million gallon underground reservoir and renovated an existing 3 million gallon reservoir up there on Ireland Trail. That gives us 5 million gallons of storage capacity and some redundancy. With the help of the Mishawaka Common Council, the city approved a rate structure in 2020 to fund multiple water improvements to serve Mishawaka. Knowing when it's time to invest in infrastructure, particularly in areas that are growing, is critical to our continued success. The project over 10 years is planned and has been planned and in preparation for over 10 years. We will begin construction on the Judy Creek Water Treatment Facility on the recently completed Veterans Parkway. Once completed, this new well field, we will be able to supply an additional 8.2 million gallons of water with room for expansion. Once the work is completed, we will decommission the Gumwood well field, and a new Judy Creek well field will be able to keep up with the growing demands on the north and east side, and will be able to supply water even on back into our existing system as needed, and water demands continue to increase. Concurrent with the Judy Creek well field, a new 1.5 million gallon water tank will be constructed at the old Gumwood well field, and expect both of these projects to they'll start this spring and last about 2 years. The proposed building design is contemporary and rural to fit in with the character of the area. I think it's very attractive. As I mentioned earlier, as part of our recovery for Mishawaka, we are proposing a stimulus bond through the city's Consolidated Tax Increment Finance District. Keeping the construction trades active will not only help them, but will be a significant compounding effect for our economy. The impactful spending makes sense because of the slow down associated with the pandemic and the historically low costs of borrowing that exist today that I outlined earlier. We are proposing to accelerate projects that have been in our capital improvement plans for years, but we have been waiting for the assembly of cash to get them off of the ground. If improved, it will be the largest TIF bond ever issued by the city, and the following projects are being considered for inclusion in the stimulus that will improve our public safety, our infrastructure, our quality of life, and housing options. Providing service for our public safety is our business. It has been one of my goals as mayor to make sure that all of our facilities are brought up to date with the current standards and technologies so that our services can be delivered both economically and efficiently. We have very impactful projects coming up in the next few years that I'm pleased to report on. In 2020, the city continued with our long-term plans to replace Fire Station number 2, currently located at Main Street north of McKinley, with a new state-of-the-art station. We are working with School City of Mishawaka to acquire the vacant property located next to Liberty School, right there on McKinley Avenue, for this replacement facility. As we do with every project, we are looking to solve multiple problems with one project. The master plan provides a new drive connection from McKinley back to the school that will serve the fire station and the school, and will help ease traffic along Pragle Drive, which is a residential street that is clogged up typically during school drop-off and pickup. It also replaces an antiquated fire station that, while quaint and in good repair, it's not capable of serving the city the way we need it to serve. For one thing, it's too small for our growing demand for service, and we are also hiring many more female firefighters, and the existing station can accommodate them. For the first time, we are now answering more calls north than south. This station will not only back up the north and south, but it also serves as our busiest EMS station. The replacement station number 2 will be much bigger with modern facilities, a community room, and will be able to house male and female firefighters equally. And it will essentially become our central station, we think, when it's completed. This is one of our projects that we're proposing for our stimulus bond, and we would like to get going on this in about 2022 instead of waiting the 5 to 10 years that it would take us to assemble the cash. Building and rebuilding infrastructure will are required to sustainably grow at a steady pace. And so we have a couple of infrastructure projects planned. First being Cedar Street from Mishawaka Avenue to Edgewater. This road, I believe, is the worst in the city of Mishawaka from a condition standpoint. The project will involve a complete tear out and rebuild, including utilities underground. The project will include digital solar speed signs, decorative street lighting, some street trees, and the relocation of utilities to underground. We have already bid this project out, and bids came in substantially less than what our engineers estimated. Over at Niles Avenue, at our neighborhood public meeting in 2019 regarding the future of Crawford Park improvements, we received a resounding request for better on-street parking for Niles Avenue to serve the park and the neighborhood. The Niles Avenue reconstruction project will include some parking improvements along the street, new storm sewer, new water main, sanitary, laterals, and also sidewalk, which would consist of an 8-foot trail, some concrete curbs, and some enhancements that go along with our My Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. And as part of the proposed stimulus bond, we are looking to do this project as well as an improvement to Crawford Park. Some of the improvements that we're looking to do there at the first phase of Crawford Park are to install new restrooms north of and across the street from Shiajiri Garden. We will replace the existing splash pad with a themed water feature and a play area along with a small pavilion if the bond is approved. I'd also like to take this opportunity to send our condolences to the Crawford family. Crawford Park's namesake, former city councilman, businessman, park patron, and contributor Don Crawford recently passed away. Our hearts and prayers go out to the Crawford family. Don left a lasting mark on our beloved hometown that will last for generations, and we miss him dearly. In fact, the very first order of business when I became mayor was to the previous administration. Mayor Ray had conceived of naming the park after Don Crawford. It was a fitting tribute, and that was my first order of business. As part of our proposed stimulus bond, we are hoping to accelerate the construction improvements planned on within Crawford Park. And so we'll look to do that here in the coming days or the coming years, next couple of years. And the Mishawaka Riverwalk continues to be a cornerstone of our city's redevelopment efforts. It connects neighborhoods and parks by taking advantage of the city's greatest natural resource, the river, and gets hundreds of thousands of visits each year. The Riverwalk also adds value to existing homes and neighborhoods and will undoubtedly be a source of pride for our citizens for generations to come. I'm excited to announce that the next phase of Riverwalk is coming soon. The city will extend the walk between Race Street and Cedar Street on the south bank of the river. The section is unique and challenging because of the private homes and businesses whose backyards will essentially butt up to right next to it. The city has nearly completed acquiring the property needed for the connection. Construction could begin as early as this fall in 2021, and I think that it will be the most spectacular section of Riverwalk with beautiful views of our downtown. Once completed along the river, we will then plan to widen the bridge, which I'll talk about in a minute. While we celebrate the big wins when it comes to projects, it's sometimes the small ones that matter the most. Last summer, I was contacted by 4-year-old Mishawaka resident, Sully Lewis. During the height of the pandemic, he wrote to tell me that a section of Riverwalk was cracked and causing him to fall off his scooter, and he asked me if I could fix it. We sent a crew out. In a matter of less than a week, we were able to fix the section of concrete. I wrote Sully back a note to let him know that he could ride again without worry. He sent me a thank you note along with a beautiful picture of himself riding on a scooter and holding my note card in his hand. What a neat little kid. Mishawaka's future looks bright because kids like Sully take an interest in our city at a very young age. Thanks for making your city better, Sully. The city, with permission of St. Joe County, who owns and maintains the Cedar Street Bridge, is working on plans to widen the bridge over the St. Joe River. The bridge widening will allow for the expansion of Riverwalk from our new section to our older sections on, between the north and south banks of the river. As part of the project, we will widen the bridge to do a cantilevered section of Riverwalk, similar to what you'd find at Logan Street Bridge. We will also do some special ornamental bridge lighting that will turn the bridge from mundane to a unique landmark for future generations, as well as some new railing. The construction portion of the bridge widening will be a federal aid project with 80% federal funds, and construction is currently set for about 2023. Buter Park is the city of Mishawaka's signature urban park with the beauty of sculptures, 30,000 plants, and cascading waterfalls, and a reestablished mill race of the factories that used it in the day. It is the centerpiece and crown jewel of our city's park system, located along the Riverwalk and multi-use path that connects thousands to 7 city of homes to 7 city parks. For almost 2 decades now. Need a drink of water here. For almost 2 decades, in marketing downtown Mishawaka for redevelopment, one of the concerns that has been routinely brought up is the apparent minimal activities that are available in the winter. This is viewed as a negative, not only for Mishawaka's downtown, but also for the region as a whole. We are routinely we hear that the one thing that we cannot change is the weather. One thing that we can change is our attitude towards the weather and its impact on how livable our region can be. As a signature project included in the proposed stimulus bond, we believe that the Ironworks Plaza improvements and ice building will turn Buter Park into a year-round attraction and will become one of the signature things to do in Indiana's cool north. The project is currently envisioned would include a variety of components. The proposed plaza, set in the middle of Buter Park, right off of our Festival Street, Ironworks Avenue, is set up as a pedestrian-friendly open area with a modern pavilion event lawn area that in the summer will be used for a variety of activities, including farmers markets, festivals, outdoor performance, and even weddings. In the winter, the main portion of the plaza will be used for skating, and small stage will be used to display our city's Christmas tree. Here in northern Indiana, we can either complain about the weather or embrace it. We choose to embrace it, though we'll still complain about it a little bit. I run the complaint department after all. The ice skating path not only provides an activity, but in connecting it to the signature cafe that we have envisioned, a close location of other restaurants, the downtown, the Riverwalk, the amenities also has the ability to attract people not directly participating in skating. The urban setting, shops and restaurants, public art, unique lighting, ambient music immediately adjacent housing, the Riverwalk, and the adjacent cafe, and unique seating areas, a mister fountain in the middle of it, and all of this will contribute to an experience. The building required a sensitive design containing 3 distinct uses: a cafe, a rink, and an event center. The rink portion of the building will have lockers, warming areas, skate rental, a room for maintenance, mechanicals, a Zamboni, and even a party room. The rink facility is intended to replace the city's current rink at Merrifield Park, which is past the end of its useful life. Here are just a few images, hot off the press, no one has seen before. This is the kind of the birthday party rental room in the skating facility. One of the elements that separates the proposed Beater Park improvements from other park venues is the in-park cafe that is envisioned. Although the cafe building will be owned by the city, the space is intended to be leased to a private entity, likely at below market rate, in order to incentivize providing the desired unique eatery, coffee house, dessert, event, drink destination, a modern decor of glass, steel, and wood with stone accents is envisioned. The cafe will have its own outdoor seating area and will contain an indoor-outdoor fireplace, contributing to the winter ambience and activity. Rent for the cafe space will be collected to generate revenue stream for specifically park maintenance. Shout out to my youth council for conceiving this project through a leadership project that they completed about 5 years ago. These teens envisioned an in-park cafe to meet with friends, grab a coffee, do homework, while enjoying the natural beauty of a park in an urban setting. And we are about to make that vision a reality. Here again are some images of our cafe. The event and banquet space was proposed as a second floor to the mechanical space that the ice rink would have to contain. It was added to take advantage of the geographically prominent position, aka the pretty views of the river and our cable-stayed bridge, and maximize the potential of perhaps the most valuable property right downtown. This space will also fill a need for event space that has been identified by our Parks Department. Compared to other venues in our system, this will be high-end event space available for rental and for city functions. Events, banquet space will have a maximum capacity of about 160. It will include a bar, rooftop patio, and a warming kitchen designed specifically for special gatherings. From a local government perspective, there are a few more symbolic projects that provides for a new beginning for the Princess City than the new Mishawaka City Hall. It's our civic home. The project is progressing well. We are done with design. Funding is in place thanks to you on the council, and the preparations are beginning. The project is nearing bidding, and our major construction will begin this spring to combine City Hall, the Mishawaka Utilities Business Office, and the Mishawaka Police Department into one building in the heart of our downtown at the corner of Main Street and Main Street. Our basic goals are these: facilitate facilities needs to better serve our public. We are designing this building to be citizen-centric. What does that mean? With citizens at the heart of everything we do there. The project had to be consistent with our downtown redevelopment efforts. It needs to fit in, be more accessible, engaging, and cohesive than the structure currently is. We had to bring the city up to date regarding technology. The building had to accommodate technology now and for the foreseeable future. And the project had to provide some flexibility to allow the growth and change over time, and we had to be as efficient as possible in our expenditures. We know that the proposed location at the corner of Main and Lincoln Way will better serve our public simply by its central location, as I said, at the corner of Main and Main. The building is directly across the street from county services, a block away from the library, in the heart of our historic downtown. Once completed, this project will also open up over 100 formerly private parking spaces for public use, which is becoming more and more crucial as development happens downtown. Once completed in 2022, it will not only improve the delivery of our services, it will dramatically modernize and improve the images of downtown Mishawaka. By having this facility in the heart of our downtown, it should also increase activity that will benefit existing businesses and foster additional further redevelopment. Concurrently to the building renovation, the city will be reviewing all aspects of how we serve our citizens. All things are on the table when it comes to serving our citizens better, more efficiently, and with the great hometown touch that they've come to expect. And I'm pleased to share with you for the first time some conceptual images of City Hall to the public. This is the corner of Lincoln Way and Main. Looking north on Main Street. One of the things we wanted to make sure was that this building, which almost is walled off to the city, is now open to the city with unique storefronts and facades. Main Street will be the Mishawaka Utilities entrance. So this is one building functioning as three separate buildings now. So on the outside, you will essentially see three separate storefronts: Mishawaka Utilities, our City Hall, and the Mishawaka Police Department, all on separate. Lincoln Way will be City Hall, Main, Mishawaka Utilities, First Street, the Police Department. Even though it may look different on the outside, on the inside we will function as one. This is the council chambers, our new civic home, which will be able to accommodate, I think, your needs much better than our existing facilities. This is the waiting area for the Mishawaka Utilities business office. A vast 10,000% improvement over what we currently have. Here is the site plan that we have been working on. This is a work in progress. It is not set in stone, but you see here that we will reconfigure some of the parking, add a couple of public accessible and a couple of plazas and things that will encourage the public to use the site. Our police memorial will be located down at the center of where First Street and Hill Street come together, and we will make sure that it is an improvement over what is currently at the Mishawaka Police Department. The idea here too is to create kind of a plaza or a quad, campus quad type of feel right where Mill Street used to be, a pedestrian thoroughfare essentially connecting Lincoln Way and First Street with this plaza. I think it's appropriate to end on a sports note. We are down to the final 2 minutes, though I might commit a couple of fouls to extend the game and stop the clock. Economic development in the city is evolving. We also know that sports is big business and getting bigger. Our geographic location in the center of our metropolitan area, combined with the high price and limited availability of land, is dictating how we grow and develop. Mishawaka was once looked upon as primarily as a retail hub of the region, and in the last few decades we have grown beyond that and have become a regional center for things such as business services and healthcare. And in the next few years, we hope to add to that distinction of being a destination for a whole new purpose, amateur athletic sports, or youth sports. I have seen where athletic facilities bring thousands of people into communities to spend much time visiting. Why have I seen this? Because I myself have spent a lot of time visiting athletic facilities while my daughter played high school travel volleyball. Many communities that have youth athletic facilities, they build them in order to bring in people to drive development of restaurants, hotels, and amenities around the complex. Mishawaka is unique. We already have the development. The only thing we are lacking is the athletic facility. And we are about ideally located in the center of a hole of the donut that does not have these facilities. There are facilities in Indianapolis, Chicago, Fort Wayne, Grand Rapids, but none in our entire region. By partnering to build such a facility, it will help us feed the beast. That is, bring people in, support our businesses that have already made an investment here. The hotel industry has had a particularly tough year. It has been said that the only thing that kept the lights on for many hotels throughout the pandemic was travel amateur sports. We know that this facility will put heads in beds and increase travel to our region, second only to the University of Notre Dame. A feasibility study was commissioned that not only validated the need and market conditions, but also recommended the best site in the area to take advantage of the highway connections and development. The city of Mishawaka happens to own property immediately east of our new Judah Creek well field and immediately east of the golf course, Judah Creek Golf Course, along the Veterans Parkway that was ideally located in the target area that a facility should be located. These are through the work with the state of Indiana, as well as our local Visit South Bend and Mishawaka. We know that the city will partner with this too, will donate the land. And the beauty of this project is that even though we will be involved on things such as donating the land, we do not have to own the project and we don't have to maintain it, and it will generate tax revenue. Klipschkard, the operator that was selected, has multiple indoor sports facilities like this across the state of Indiana, including the Indiana Pacers training facility in Noblesville, Indiana, and many others around the state. Indiana has also got engaged. The state legislature adopted a measure that required 0.5% of the 6% innkeeper's tax in St. Joe County to be allocated to support the Mishawaka project. That's the first of its kind ever sustainable funding that Mishawaka has ever received. And that early in 2021 is part of the request to move the innkeeper's tax from 6% to 8% downstate to fund more tourism. The Mishawaka portion has been proposed to increase to a full 1% of that innkeeper's tax. The bill has passed the full Senate a few weeks ago, and just today it passed the House. It now has to go back to the Senate for concurrence and will then go on to the governor. And we anticipate passage very soon and a long-term stream of income that will be dedicated to support this facility, ensuring its long-term viability and success. The city is currently working with both Klipschkard and Visit South Bend, Mishawaka to move this project forward. As currently envisioned, the project would include about 350,000 square foot building that would house 8 multi-purpose courts, 2 turf fields, and 2 sheets of ice under roof. In addition, 4 outside fields are envisioned that could be used for both baseball, soccer, and maybe even lacrosse. The developer is currently completing a financial study identified with a funding gap that exists between what can be funded through the revenue that I mentioned earlier and versus what the facility would generate. And we expect that this important City of Mishawaka project will bring in tens of thousands of visitors that will come in from outside of the area. And again, that will benefit people who have invested here already. The project, once complete, will further diversify our economy, and it will also, we think, benefit some of the campuses that are already here, such as the healthcare and business services, and so much more. I also envision this facility to be an anchor of sorts to what could be a sports and entertainment capital or campus on the far northeast side of our city. I've thrown out the ambitious goal of beginning construction by the end of 2021. That was prior to the plan to expand into indoor ice sheets based on market needs, and so that right now is being studied. So a more realistic timeline should be about early next year to get going with construction. Last week, a pet project of mine drew national news and became a top trending story nationally on the USA Today's Golf Week site. I always dreamed of making it big in golf, but this isn't quite how I had imagined it. It wasn't my golfing prowess, rather our buried treasure that made the news. The St. Joe County Drainage Board, under the leadership of John Law, committed to dredging Willow Creek because it had really been getting choked out from a lot of sediment and vegetation and not draining properly. When I mentioned that I thought there was buried WPA wall underground and that we should dig it up and expose the original creek, my colleagues looked at me like I was a mad scientist. They humored me, and the Drainage Board ultimately approved. A guy on a backhoe started digging and, to their surprise, uncovered pristine WPA stonework, built by Mishawaka residents nearly 90 years ago during the Great Depression, and then buried about 75 years ago when Petro Park was converted to the golf course. Now that I convinced the skeptical and highly overrated staff, just kidding about that last comment there. I love them all, they know it. And they've seen what's below ground. Our field expedition revealed that there could be much more buried under there as well. And we are all now very excited about continuing to expose the remainder of it, which should come later this year. Seriously, I believe it's our responsibility to unearth and protect these rare, unique historical treasures that meant the difference between Mishawaka families having food on the table and going hungry during the Great Depression. We also made national news just today as our portable skate park story hit the AP wire. Our portable skate park will be located at the Merrifield Skating Rink, but it is portable, meaning that we can pick it up and take it to multiple parks or events. We've long eyed a skate park of this in the city, and this is a flexible option that will allow us to creatively do all kinds of new events down at our Parks Department and engage our youth. Multiple community partners have already stepped up to either donate to this amenity or to purchase safety equipment for it. Well, just a few seconds left. Believe it or not, I have enough left for overtime if you're game. There is plenty of information that I didn't or will not get to cover because of the constraints of time. My summary highlights just a few of the accomplishments and ongoing efforts. And I would like to encourage everyone to read the full department reports and for the complete perspective on what's going on for the city. The State of the City report, including the presentation, will be available at mishawaka.in.gov first thing in the morning. Our new beginning can't happen without great service and a great team. This is the level of government, and these are the services that are closest to the Mishawaka people. And it is these services that makes serving here so rewarding. No matter what happens at the national, state, or regional levels, our citizens can rest assured that Mishawaka will remain stable, the safe harbor in turbulent seas. That is because of the cooperative teamwork and professionalism of all who serve our Princess City. Although I get the honor and the privilege to rather inadequately stand up here and share it with you, the collective works that make Mishawaka the best hometown in America, it's the great team of public servants that I get to work with each day that makes this city thrive. It not only shows in the great services that they provide, but the manner in which they provide it. Mishawaka is special because of our world-class services that our staff provides. And that never matters more or was more evident than a year like we've just endured. Despite the uncertainty of the great pandemic, the grass and weeds kept growing. Trash still needed to be picked up, leaves still dropped, and countless other tasks needed to get done that couldn't be put on hold because of COVID. And the phone continued to ring for service. One such call came in following a windstorm that knocked down a tree along Winger Avenue. Mr. Viral Stam, a 75-year resident of Mishawaka, called to report the damage. Crews from Central Services responded immediately, mobilized, and cleaned the mess of limbs from the alley and the street. Mr. Stam went out to clean the sawdust and the small limbs, but noticed that they too were gone without already cleared. Shortly after, a street sweeper came through to finish the job, and in less than 2 hours, the damage had been cleaned without a trace. Mr. Stam was so impressed that he wrote me a beautiful letter to express his gratitude and pride in the excellent, well-done work of the department, and came to my office to hand deliver it to me. The world needs more Viral Stams, now more than ever. And this is the kind of service that our team of all-stars deliver on a daily basis. World-class services delivered by everyday heroes. Why? Because first and foremost, we're citizens here too. And that's the kind of city we want to live in. That's the kind of team that we want to be on. Like ball teams, there are those cities that are rebuilding, those that are a couple of years away from being a couple of years away perpetually, and there are perennial powers built for continued success. I believe that Mishawaka is the latter. We have the team, we have the leadership, we have the game plan, we have the winning expectation. I believe that Mishawaka's best days are yet ahead. And before closing, I would like to thank my family, without whom nothing is possible in my life. I'd also like to thank the citizens of Mishawaka for providing me this special opportunity to serve. I consider it the most important work of my life, to serve my hometown in this way. I love it, I'm inspired by it, I find it challenging and rewarding, and I never ever take it for granted. There's no place I'd rather be, and there's no one I'd rather share this journey with than you all. I'm running out of ways to say it, but never doubt that I mean it. With that, the final buzzer has just sounded for this presentation, but our game is just beginning. May the princess always look over your shoulder, and may God continue to bless you, our citizens, our staff, and our beloved city of Mishawaka.